Hello, this is T Chapman 500 with a part 2 of my Factorio playthrough, and well, it's been a few months since I recorded this segment. Actually, there are 3 segments that I recorded several months ago as of the time of this post-commentary, so I don't really remember everything I did when I recorded this stuff. Also, to preserve disk space, and because I didn't really want to do that much without recording, I kind of just stopped playing this world for a while. I don't know if I built this new green circuit build in the last video or between videos, but here's what we have now. I believe this is one green belt of green circuits. One of the things I need to do is expand this RoboPort network, and also make everything fit into a nice RoboPort network grid. I'm also upgrading the Vulcanus factory to Tier 3 assembly machines to get 150 science a minute. I'm not sure if the rest of the factory can support it, but we can change that as well. Hopefully remotely. Looks like I'm upgrading red circuit production to be done using the electromagnetic plants from Factorio. With very few exceptions, anything that can be built in the new Space Age buildings will be built in the new Space Age buildings. And for now at least, I'm gonna use a bot mall to make sure I don't get any more spaghetti. This train station setup for the upcoming Fogoran Science Pack factory is not staying. I have enough recyclers here to produce 180 Fogoran Science Packs per minute. That's going to require continuous unloading from 5 separate mines at the same time. This power station must be moved by the end of the video, along with all of these accumulators, including the ones I'm putting down now. I don't know why I decided to do this, but for some reason I'm blueprinting my Fogoran Science Pack production on Factorio in my main save, rather than in the lab. Can you guess which mistake I'm gonna make when building this? If you guessed I'd build it for 150 science a minute instead of 180 science a minute, you would be correct. And of course my little steam engine setup isn't gonna produce enough power, so here's another accumulator spam. Here comes the very first mine that's gonna be used in the production of the Fogoran Science Packs. I'm adding a small buffer just before the station to maximize throughput. Routing trains on Factorio, especially without the foundational supports, is a pain to say the least. To be fair though, the robots make it a lot less of a pain than it otherwise would be. The real pain of Factorio comes in making sure that nothing backs up. Each resource that's needed by either the rocket silos or the science production is gonna get a priority splitter going straight to that. Whatever does not get consumed by the science production or the rocket silos will simply be voided. The main issue is gonna be making sure that we get all of the resources we need for science and rocket production before we void the rest. By the way, did I mention that voiding items as quickly as possible is more of an art form? For instance, to effectively void iron plates, you need to first craft those iron plates into iron chests and then feed those iron chests into a recycler, which then feeds the iron plates from the recycling back into the iron chest assembly. The scrap must flow. I don't yet know how to void blue circuits as efficiently as possible. Anyways, now that we have science production going, it's time for rocket production. Fortunately, most of the resources for rocket production are completely free, or as free as they can get on Factorio. Initially, I was thinking of making a large buffer of science packs for each silo, but I eventually ditched the idea. I'll just feed the science packs directly into the silo using the belts and inserters. No buffer chests. The rocket inventories will themselves be the buffers, and that way I can ensure that every time a Ranger-class vessel arrives, all 6 rockets fire at once. This is probably overkill for rocket fuel production, but I'm not taking any chances. And of course, this spaghetti isn't fast enough at processing the resources I need. We're not even at capacity yet. Time to configure one of my ships to request Fogoran Science Packs. For some reason, instead of adding more efficiency modules to my factory, I'm adding more power production. I probably need both anyways. Here's the second suboptimal mine I'm gonna build for the science production. I'll be so glad when I get rail support foundations researched. And once again, I'm blueprinting on the main world instead of in the lab. Pro tip, always split your rail networks into small blocks so that multiple trains can be on the line at the same time. Well, it looks like Volcanus is ready to receive its first delivery of Fulgoran science packs. A few minutes later, Volcanus received its first shipment of Fulgoran science packs, so it's time to research the Fulgoran tech tree. It's quite satisfying to see all of the labs fired up at once. Too bad the rocket silos won't all fill up with science packs before the ship returns. Looks like the science factory needs more power. A few minutes later, we have completed research on Rail Support Foundation and Fulgoran Science Pack achievements. But like with Volcanus, I want to complete the entire Fulgoran tech tree before going off to the next planet. Next up are the big lightning rods, by the way. They are far more efficient than the small ones. A few months of not playing this game later, I finally decide to start fixing up this place, starting with the science. This is why you build stuff in the lab first. Fortunately, I had enough room left over that I could make the necessary modifications. This time anyways. Now it's time to optimize these train stops. I suppose I don't have to tell you how incredibly dangerous this is. I probably should have closed all the train stops before doing construction work on them, but I didn't think of that at the time. The first iteration of the improved train stop design didn't go so well. Can you spot the mistake I'm about to make? Needless to say, I could have done a much better job on these exit paths. Well, I finally spotted the mistake. I was supposed to connect the exit path to the other side of the roundabout. And here's my first attempt at making the new entrance area. It didn't go too well. Yeah, I'm gonna have to manually resolve this deadlock. By the way, I've completed the entire Fulgoran tech tree. Resolving the deadlock is quite simple. I just need to make sure that every station has a buffer area large enough to fit all of the trains that want to go to that station. Had I done this from the beginning, there would never have been a deadlock. That only took a few minutes, and I eventually set all of the trains back to automatic mode. This also won't be the last modification I make to this rail network. I'm gonna try to extend this platform out a little bit, but Volcanus doesn't have the infrastructure needed to perform the extension. I also have a little bit of fixing up to do on Novice. I accidentally disconnected some stuff from the main power grid. Correction, from the only power grid. Oh, rats. Alright, so, there may have been a slight mishap with me trying to extend the steam production to get more water production, but nothing that some quick thinking can't fix. Alright, let's hook the power back up. That was close. By the way, how do you like my new mech armor? It's just standard quality with standard quality equipment, but that should be good enough for Gleba. This is basically the equipment mall. We pretty much don't need anything else. Now, Volcanus has gotten a slight upgrade. We can now export science packs from Volcanus, and we're going to export them to Gleba. Gleba will not be making any of these 6 basic science packs. They're all gonna come in from Volcanus. Volcanus has also been expanded so that it can build space platforms. Everything we need to build a space platform will be on Volcanus, and don't worry, space platforms that are built from Volcanus are actually quite safe for a little while. That being said, they do need repair packs eventually, as well as defenses. Alright, now for Novice. I've been preparing by disconnecting the science from the labs, so we're gonna be moving all of our research to Gleba. Novice will not be doing any research. Volcanus will still be doing research where it can, but all of the research is going to be done on Gleba, at least the research that requires the Gleba science pack, so that we're not wasting it. Also, here's the new copper layout, which is disconnected. I'm not going to connect it quite yet, but we are going to be conserving resources so that we are using them exclusively for building the space platforms. Scout, by the way, is going to be our science transport vessel. This station is going to be expanded a little bit so that it can basically self-expand without relying on anything from Novice. We might end up having to rely on stuff from Novice anyways. This is also trying to be expanded, and it looks like we just received our first shipment. We're going to be using this platform to send basically everything that Volcanus needs to produce infinite resources, which primarily is calcite, but it also needs coal and carbon, which we can send the carbon down, convert that to coal, except we're probably going to need to make it so that it can do the coal on the platform. But that's a little ways off. Also, these Ranger-class transports are nowhere near sufficient to be able to transport science packs from Gleba to Novice, so they are also going to be getting an upgrade. Actually, I might just create a new class of vessel for that. We are going to be using the Ranger to start our Gleba base. I think you will agree that that was a terrible, absolutely terrible live commentary. Anyways, you might have seen that I had to hook up the copper sooner than I anticipated because, well, Novice ran out. And while I'm at it, I might as well also hook in the iron. Not closing this station was a big mistake. So remember what I said about getting all of my supplies from Volcanus instead of Novice? Well, I didn't quite do what I intended to do. Though it is kind of difficult for Volcanus to load uranium ammunition onto a spacecraft. I didn't know this at the time, but it's going to take well over 3 hours for Novice to finish loading the Ranger with all that ammunition for Gleba. So I've got a lot of time to kill. A whole lot of time to kill. By the way, did I mention I had time to kill? Also, I now have a city block blueprint. My entire Novice base is going to be converted. Since I have the time to kill anyways, I can get by with making blueprints in my primary world rather than the lab. This particular blueprint is going to be for steam power through boilers. This new power plant is going to use steam turbines rather than the current steam engines, which are more space efficient. The inserters that fuel the boilers are going to be on their own power grid to make this base completely blackout-proofed. Well, maybe not completely blackout-proofed, but once the fuel reaches the inserters, they will be inserted into the boilers, which will resolve the blackout. This small amount of accumulators and solar panels is all it's going to take to completely blackout-proof this new power plant. I'm going to make 5 of these to replace the current 4 set of boilers powering the base. This is also pretty much where I discover that I'm not manufacturing steam turbines on Novice. Oops. I actually need 17 solar panels if I want to power both the inserters and the lights. Or at least that's what would be needed if the lights were actually on during the day. Though, assuming that everything you need to power is going to be consuming all of the power all of the time, definitely makes the calculations a lot easier. I'm going to need to do a lot of rerouting of the rail networks because they're currently in the way, and I don't want them to be in the way. I'm tearing up the old power plant as the new one gets built. I intend to recycle those old steam engines. Those 5 blocks, by the way, produce a total of 360 megawatts of power. So now it's time to remove the last of those old steam engines. Also, here's a blueprint for uranium cannon shells and explosive cannon shells. For some reason, the robots decided to build out this coal expansion, so I might as well hook it up into the main base. It's not gonna get priority though. The spaghetti must grow. And of course the uranium is backed up. Why wouldn't it be? I'm finally getting flamethrower ammo up. It's gonna be pointless on Volcanus, but it's gonna be of use on both Novice and Gleba. I am not shipping flamethrower ammo from Novice to Gleba. Unlike with the other planets where I didn't bother shipping in materials for the rocket silos or rockets, for Gleba, I'm gonna do exactly that. Also, I'm going to ship productivity modules. For some reason, I thought building more rocket silos would help my situation. Guess what? It didn't, because the rocket silos didn't even get built before the Ranger was ready. Now to diagnose what's wrong with these rocket silos. Like, why I'm only getting 2 at a time. Oh wait, did you see that? Yeah, that. That explains everything. A bit late, but better late than never. Novice needs more calcite, so, time to adjust the requests. Oh, would you look at that? The Ranger is on its way to Fulgora. That means we're ready. Almost. So, with pretty much everything ready to go, it's time to queue up Gleba. Although, I do have a confession to make. I've kind of been putting off Gleba as much as possible, although having to wait about 3.5 hours for the Ranger to get loaded with all the stuff was not part of that plan. Well, that's it. Gleba research is complete. I definitely wanted to get this launch on camera. We are now going aboard the Ranger, and I'm gonna have to cut this short because, well, I don't want the Ranger to start moving the moment we board. Still though, I'll never get tired of this animation. Too bad I had to interrupt it to make sure that the Ranger wouldn't take off the moment we landed on it. Before we actually head off to Gleba, there's one more thing we need to take care of. Having productivity modules for that rocket silo. Also, it would probably help if I turned the request on. I suppose I didn't have to wait until the modules arrived on the Scout since I'm going on the Ranger. But there's not much I can do about it now, is there? So I'm just going to add Gleba to the schedule and make sure the departure conditions are such that I don't get an accidental departure. Or I could just remove all of the other planets from the schedule and I wouldn't have to worry about it. Guess which option I failed to consider was an actual option. A planet's evolution factor starts going up the moment something enters orbit around it. Because Gleba is scary enough as it is, I decided to spend some time studying the Gleba tech tree. Every planet has trigger techs that you must unlock before you can actually start researching. Of all the planets in the system, Gleba probably has the most of these trigger techs. Of course, there are trigger techs after we begin researching with science packs, but those are few and far between. I think I've delayed long enough. It's time to go to the Nightmare Planet. By the way, did I mention that Gleba has a terrible reputation? This is for multiple reasons. Yes, multiple. You'll find out what they are soon enough. On the way, I pre-arranged a couple of drop pods, including my own, so we're gonna have plenty of stuff to start out with, particularly to place the landing pad. This animation will never get old. Also, we get an achievement. There's pretty much one thing that's been on my mind for this planet this whole playthrough. Dread. Right now, I have to claim all of the materials from those drop pods I sent down. I only sent down 2 for now, but we'll send down the rest later. Here's a nice clearing for the landing pad. Now to attach the cargo bays. Fortunately for us, Gleba actually starts quite peaceful, but it's not gonna stay peaceful for long. I'll send down a couple thousand more stacks of items before we begin. Did you notice that Ranger is missing something? Yep, we need to send the Ranger back to Volcanus to get some belts. Anyways, the primary mechanic of Gleba is spoilage. Nearly everything we chop down produces spoilage, and pretty much only spoilage. But this spoilage is actually quite useful. There are, of course, plants that produce wood. So you can, in theory, come here with nothing. Here are some boom puffs. You might want to be careful. They provide you with spoilage, wood, and environmental damage. These rocks are copper stromatolites. Mining them unlocks the heating tower, and we're gonna need a lot of those. They also produce copper bacteria, which spoils into copper ore. We also get a little bit of stone out of it, and here are some iron stromatolites. When mined, they produce iron bacteria, which spoils into iron ore. Mining them also unlocks the agricultural tower. The agricultural tower, by the way, is how we're gonna feed nearly the entire factory. Here's a small forest of Yamako trees. Mining these unlocks Yamako processing. Processing Yamako fruit produces Yamako seeds and Yamako mash. By the way, we're gonna need to create a whole lot of nutrients, and we can do that by turning spoilage into nutrients, though that's rather inefficient. And here's the other fruit of Gleba, jelly nut. Mining it unlocks jelly nut processing. Processing jelly nut fruit produces jelly and jelly nut seeds. Eating jelly gives you a nice temporary speed boost, as well as extra health. And turning spoilage into nutrients unlocks the biochamber. Like with the foundry and electromagnetic plant, the biochamber has a built-in 50% productivity bonus. And here we have our first look at the enemies of Gleba. Small egg rafts which appear to spawn nothing, but I'm gonna stay clear of it because I don't want to accidentally destroy it. Yet. Here comes a small furnace setup. Now, I could do this the smart way or the hard way. The smart way is using boilers and steam turbines to generate the electricity needed to power those furnaces. The hard way is making a solar farm, which by the way will black out every night. Also, within Gleba's atmosphere, only works at half power. Oh look, the ranger has belts now. Time to send it back to Gleba. Oh, now I'm being smart and setting up steam power for the base. Might as well go with the full stack. And of course there's gonna be a backup fuel in the form of wood. And eventually another backup fuel in the form of spoilage. The primary fuel right now is carbon from space. And it's not like there's ever going to be a situation where both of my spacecraft are not in orbit around Gleba, right? I really need to start clearing out my inventory. Oh look, it's our escape plan, and by the way, that rocket silo is now pretty much permanent until I can start building them on my own. By the way, I've been handcrafting spoilage into nutrients in the background for quite some time, so that I can unlock artificial soil. Well, I need to build a biochamber to unlock bioflux, which means I need pentapod eggs, which means I need to attack an egg raft. Well, here goes nothing. Oh, that's it? It turns out that if you prepare, Gleba enemies are just not that much of a threat. That being said, I have 15 minutes to craft 2 biochambers before those eggs hatch. And trust me on this, you do not want them to hatch. I'm gonna need a lot of landfill on this planet, so I might as well get started now. And by the way, I already made a mistake. I'll give you a hint. It has to do with the fact that I already have stone from Volcanus. Also, because of my terrain generation settings, those stone patches are much larger than they would otherwise be. With normal settings, you would barely be able to fit 4 regular miners on the stone patch, much less 4 big miners. Anyways, I finished crafting those biochambers, so now I can make bioflux, which, by the way, requires biochambers. I should not be taking this much Yamako from the forest. Not only because my inventory is nearly full, but also because I should be conserving resources. At this point, I am clearly panic building. I should just go into a test world and build up my entire factory there. Although having a temporary setup is more than acceptable, I'm still panic building even with the temporary setup. Remember not to take all of that island. Rats. Yep, I'm definitely panic building. Bioflux unlocks the last of the trigger technologies before we have to start researching to progress further. And with this last bit of bioflux being crafted, we have finally unlocked the Agricultural Science Pack. We are now unable to progress any further until we can start producing Agricultural Science Packs. By the way, did I mention that biochambers need nutrients as fuel? Well, looks like I need more pentapod eggs. This time I'm only getting 1, but that'll have to be enough. Oh look, I found another egg raft. Well, time to loot it. And now to panic build those biochambers. My biggest fear right now is those pentapod eggs hatching in my pockets. Fortunately, that's not gonna happen this time. This is a temporary setup, believe it or not, and it's also quite the panic build. I really need to learn how to set up a proper temporary Gleba base without panic building. But this is my first time on Gleba, so what can I say? I need more pentapod eggs, which means I need to find egg rafts, and well, I think I found one. The previous enemy you saw was called a wriggler. These, however, are called strafers. And that large one is called a stomper. Oh, and by the way, that's a small stomper. Gun turrets are useless against strafers, by the way. And let's just say you don't want to be directly underneath a stomper. Did I mention that was a small stomper? Strafers have their own homing missiles, which are actually quite easy to avoid, as you just saw me do there. Now that the stomper's down, let's take care of that egg raft. Gleba enemies, by the way, have a built-in laser resistance. It doesn't seem to be helping them, and by the way, this is how much damage they do. Keep in mind that those are the small wrigglers. It's a good thing I came prepared with all of these rockets. Right now I just need the pentapod eggs for the biochambers, but eventually I'll need to farm them inside biochambers, because pentapod eggs are required for both the science packs and for overgrowth soil, which I have not unlocked yet. You might have also noticed how long it has taken me to finally take down that nest. It seems the small egg rafts don't actually spawn anything unless they detect spores, but the large egg rafts definitely spawn stuff. Time to panic build about 20 biochambers. I've also decided to build a bot mall so I'll rely less on imports from other planets. This is more or less just a panic build. Well, all of the pentapod eggs have been successfully converted into biochambers. Now it's time to place an agricultural tower. The goal here is to maximize the usable farm area. A tree can be planted on any square that's green. Each of these squares is 3 by 3 tiles, and in order for it to be usable by the agricultural tower, it cannot have anything else in it. Routing belts through the Gleba swamp is fun. And here comes the spaghetti. Unlike on Novice, where spaghetti will simply make it very difficult for you to expand your factory, on Gleba, spaghetti can and will lock up your factory and spoil everything. To maximize usable farmland, I need to do some slight tweaking on the placement of these belts and power poles. That's still not optimal, but at least it opens up some more farmland. I built a whole panic factory off camera and then tore it down off camera. I intended to record myself tearing down the panic factory so you could see what it looks like, but I forgot. Anyways, I'm going to optimize this agricultural tower real quick and disconnect it from the power grid. Also, the boilers are out of fuel, so the base, what's left of it, is blacked out. But that's nothing a few solar panels can't fix. And by a few, I mean a few hundred. The reason for the blackout is because none of the Ranger-class vessels are in orbit around Gleba. I'll fix that by moving one of my stationary platforms to Gleba. Since the speed of a platform is directly proportional to its width, I'm gonna get rid of some of that width. I actually need to make room inside the hub for more space platform. Here's how not to reconfigure an inserter. Never set it to blacklist with a blank blacklist. Now it's impossible for me to re-extend the space platform. And it's about here that I noticed that I'm quite slow at moving, but I haven't figured out why yet. Here comes the agricultural tower for Jelly Nut. I placed the belts correctly this time, but I didn't place the power pole correctly. Don't worry, I fix it later. I've noticed several times that Gleba's putting a real strain on my system, so I'm gonna reduce the graphics settings. And the results are immediate. Sure, it doesn't look as good, but at least I can play it now. By the way, I discovered the cause of my slowness. That's much better. By the way, this is pretty much the size of a stone patch that you should expect to find, although I think even that's a little bit big. Time to place down an actual Gleba starter base that is not a panic base. Don't worry, I made a mistake that'll cause this to turn into a panic base real quickly. You might have noticed that my blueprint contains walls. This is just in case the pentapod eggs hatch into big wrigglers. This is actually quite sufficient to contain them so long as you don't have active defense structures. By the way, I should not have put in the gate. here comes more spaghetti. And of course no playthrough would be complete without some sort of mishap, as if the blackout itself isn't a mishap. Believe it or not, this is all it takes to produce 180 agricultural science packs per minute, plus a trickle of iron and copper, so long as neither backs up. I need some pentapod eggs to kickstart science production, so here's a small battle, with 2 nests that can't spawn anything unless I destroy them. And I might as well get this 3rd nest while I'm at it. It doesn't take too long to kickstart the science production, just this will be enough. Forgot the water. Oops. I need to do something with this bioflux. Oh, I can eat it. By the way, remember what I said about this quickly turning into a panic base? Well, anyways, time to take care of the spoilage. Each of these heating towers will consume a full stack of spoilage in a split second. Well, I've got the trickle of iron and copper. Don't worry, that won't last long. I need to reconfigure this spaghetti so that the nutrients actually get to all the places they need to get to. This isn't the prettiest solution in the world, but at least it works. Note to self, tight nutrient loops are bad. To make sure that my farms never die, I need to process as much jelly as I can. It just so happens that this will be useful for later for stuff like preventing my base from blacking out every 10 minutes. For now, I'm just going to discard the excess jelly, but I need to make sure that I send all of the seeds back to the farm. Also, here's the blueprint for the labs that I came up with. It's been about 2 hours since I stamped down this starter base blueprint. And after waiting for about half an hour for belts from Volcanus, I finally decided it was time to start doing research. I want to get off this planet. I hate this planet. I need to tear up the entire base and start over. Anyways, we're researching advanced asteroid processing first because I really need it. The order of everything else is pretty much irrelevant, but I just love seeing all these labs lit up. It takes about 15 minutes for the first item to complete. Of course, we get an achievement for it. So naturally, the first thing I do is reconfigure all of my space platforms to utilize the new recipes. I also adjust the requests of each cargo landing pad that I have. I'm also gonna create a new space platform in orbit around Volcanus. Don't worry, it's quite safe so long as we quickly get the repair packs up as well. Wait a minute. These aren't supposed to both be stopped at Volcanus. What's going on? Remember what I said in the last video about the Ranger class vessels being upgradable to make their own repair packs? Turns out that's not going to be possible because I'm missing the gear assembler. At least I can upgrade fuel production. There's rocket turrets, which we'll need in order to go to Aquilo. I am definitely not looking forward to that. I'm manually fulfilling the request for repair packs for that new space platform. And I've also renamed a couple platforms. Looks like I got myself into a battle just as the Spidertron finished researching. I need more biochambers. And I need to put more stuff in the research queue. Not that it matters because this base cannot sustain 150 science a minute. Here's some steel production, not that it matters because the iron and copper bacteria are going to run out every time it backs up. And this is why I can't sustain 150 science a minute. This is happening pretty much every night now. Here's my solution to the backout problem. This is all I need, but I don't know that yet. I've built 8 too many biochambers producing rocket fuel. And of course, it has all of the hallmarks of a panic build. Because it kind of is a panic build. Volcanus is taking forever to launch its rockets, and this molten iron shortage is why. It wasn't until after I finished recording this that I discovered through the Factorio Lab calculator that I only needed 4 of these rocket fuel plants. So now you know one of the things I'm gonna do off camera. Well, with the exception of Aquilo, I have researched all of the technologies that can be researched. So now it's time to head back to Navas to get that trigger tech. At least for now, we're still going to be doing all of our research on Gleba. By the way, I figured out how to get automated repair packs on the Ranger class vessels. It's not pretty, but it works. Here's what a stacked belt looks like. The big mining drills automatically stack the belts as high as they can go. I'm adding 2 more rocket silos to this setup. The one on the right will always send up repair packs. The one on the left will send up whatever I want, whenever I want. The original 6 silos will remain set to auto-fulfill requests forever. Or at least until I rebuild the whole setup. By the way, we're due for a complete rebuild of all of my factories. I suppose this is what I get for panic building rather than properly planning things out in the lab. If only fixing a Gleba factory were that simple. Oh look, it's broken again. This'll fix that build eventually. It only needs one access point onto the spoilage belt anyways. Oops. I'm gonna change out the lasers with more roboports from Fulgora. These capture rockets will be used to, tame the biter nests. Because we're definitely not gonna force them to do our bidding. Not yet anyways. I'm gonna have the rocket silo leach the rocket fuel from the boilers. This should be blackout proofed. Now to send the capture rockets up to the Ranger. Thanks to a couple of resupply missions, I have the resources to launch at least 3 rockets. I'm gonna be on the 3rd rocket. And here's our target. I am once again stealing an idea from Michael Hendricks. The final step in this blueprint is configuring the laser turrets to not shoot the nests. Now that we have a good setup to use to defend ourselves while we capture the nest, it's time to board the Ranger and head off to Novice. Looks like electric furnace production is not accessible to the bots on Volcanus. I'll have to fix that. And of course my attempt to fix it gets interrupted by an animation. Why wouldn't it be? But surely this won't cause me to forget. Right? Here we come. Home sweet home. Oh look, a nice synchronous landing to top it all off. This is my first return to Novice, but it probably won't be my last. Time to send down the equipment from the Ranger, and update my personal logistics requests. Oh, forgot about that. Well, that solves that problem. Now to get that trigger tech. Usually when approaching a nest for the first time, my heart would be going quite fast, but this time I feel nothing. At least until I realize none of my laser turrets are firing. Let's try that again. This time we're gonna make sure that the power is connected. And with one more stamp of the blueprint, the nest is effectively neutralized. Now to launch the capture rocket. This process will take a couple seconds. In the meantime, spitters will keep spawning until the nest is captured. Once captured, I have to feed it to keep it under my control, but I'm not gonna do that. Not yet anyways. If you starve the nest, it'll revert back to its wild nature. And since I don't need it for anything right now, I'm just gonna let it revert back to its wild nature. If we feed it once it's captured, it'll start producing biter eggs. The biter eggs will eventually hatch into big biters if we remove them from the nest without doing anything with them. And now that I've unlocked the trigger tech, I am going to research the rest of the non-infinite Gleba-specific technologies. Unfortunately, the ability to produce our own biter spawners is locked behind cryogenic science, and we need to go to Aquilo for that. So why not queue up Aquilo right now, and we'll figure out the logistics later on. By the way, I'm gonna need a new class of ship for Aquilo. Time for a little bit of fun. This is way too easy. Perhaps this nest will provide a challenge? Nope. How about this one? Guess not. I don't really play Factorio for the combat challenge anyways. That's why I've slowed down evolution and given myself a large starting area. I will make Scout my science transport, picking up science packs from Volcanus and Fulgora and dropping them off at Gleba. I think I'll call this island Biter Island. The biters on Biter Island are now extinct. Perhaps I had a little bit too much fun. After about 4 or 5 large nests, including nests with medium worms, my mech armor is pretty much out of power. By the way, I've also solved the science logistics issue, completely remotely. Oh look, I'm back on Gleba. Trust me on this, I did not miss this place one bit. Nice synchronized landing though. I should not have put the electromagnetic science pack completely on its own belt. Oh, what's this? An inserter loop? Oh, we can't have that. No wonder my science per minute is dropping. I will have to adjust the filters. And I'll have to adjust the filters again once I unlock cryogenic science. That'll keep up the SPM for a little while until we run out of science packs. By the way, due to floating point rounding errors, sometimes this happens. Aquilo finally gets unlocked while I'm cleaning up Volcanus. Anyways, we're not going to Aquilo quite yet. Let's see how little of the factory overhauls I can get by with not recording. I would like to save my remaining hard drive space for Aquilo and for reaching the edge of the system to beat the game. Your days are numbered, Mr. Medium Demolisher. Before we head off to Aquilo, I want to make sure that Gleba is entirely self-sufficient, like all of the other planets. I've been building up this bot mall as needed. but I've either been cutting it out of the video or building it off camera. The bot mall needs to be able to produce everything that can be produced on Gleba. This furnace stack is no longer being used, so I'm just gonna get rid of it. The base is gonna be upgraded so that every heating tower is capable of providing the base with some power. And this biochamber needs to swap positions with the heat exchanger for that to happen. Why is the storage area so full of spoilage? By the way, here's what happens if the pentapod eggs hatch. If there's no valid target for them, then they won't try to attack anything. Unfortunately for me, I'm a valid target. But unfortunately for them, so are they. But look how much damage they did to my walls while trying to get to me. The walls are just to keep them from wandering out of that area and finding a valid target to attack. This new wall area should be plenty of space to fit the heat exchangers. Each heating tower supports up to 4 heat exchangers at maximum capacity. These 4 heat exchangers in turn support up to 6 steam turbines at full power. The exact ratio is 103 steam turbines to every 60 heat exchangers. Each offshore pump supports 116 heat exchangers. The exact ratio is 2 offshore pumps for every 223 heat exchangers. This setup alone is enough to produce 40 megawatts of power. That 40 megawatts comes exclusively from spoilage and pentapod eggs. By the way, any spoilage that's in that box is going to be consumed by the heating tower. Can you spot the mistake I just made? This is artificial soil. There's one for Jelly Nut and one for Yamako. They allow you to extend the farmable area around agricultural towers, and they can only be placed in their respective biomes on Gleba. Artificial Yamako soil is a greenish-yellow color. These artificial soils are placed exactly like landfill, but the placement conditions are far more restrictive. Artificial Jelly Nut soil has a magenta-ish color. It has the same placement conditions as the Yamako soil, except for the biome. Oh, that's why my logistics storage is filling up with spoilage. Fixed. And I discovered my mistake with the new power generation system. There, it's fixed. I now have a total of 7 of these setups with a total capacity of 280 megawatts. And of course it didn't save, so now I have to do this all over again. Fortunately, you don't have to watch me do it all over again. This time I'm just gonna do a 1:1:1 ratio of heating towers, heat exchangers, and steam turbines. This is simply because there's no way that these waste disposals will be able to sustain 40 megawatts. This already looks much better. I decided to set up a bot mall blueprint for the biochambers. There's just one problem. I can't select all the recipes. Woob, please fix. Having to manually reconfigure everything after it's been placed really defeats the purpose of blueprinting. By the way, the heating tower and everything attached to it are going away. We've got red circuit production on Gleba now. And here's the inserter mall. By the way, here's what happens if I send the Ranger out to Aquilo. The closer you get to Aquilo, the more of these big asteroid chunks you find, which have a flat 2,000 damage reduction rating. That means if you fail to do at least 2,000 hit points of damage per shot, then you effectively do 0 damage. On the bright side, the first hit point of damage will always count, but only the first hit point of damage. Here's what these big asteroids do to your ship, and this is what happens when the space platform hub gets destroyed. Fortunately, we're not going to be sending the Ranger off to its doom. We're going to be sending it and Scout back to Novice for some refits. Scout will be sent directly to Volcanus after its refit. From there, it'll pick up 1,000 of each of the 6 common science packs, as well as 2,000 of the Volcanus exclusive science packs. From there, it will go to Gleba, where it will drop off its entire payload if there's room available, before heading off to Fulgora to pick up 6,000 of the Fulgoran-specific science packs. Fulgora has 6 rocket silos that are exclusive to the science packs, and 2 rocket silos free for everything else. Scout will likely get a load of supercapacitors and superconductors for its return trip. Scout is going to go directly from Fulgora to Gleba to drop off its electromagnetic science packs. Then it's going to go directly from Gleba to Volcanus to start the process all over again. It will never return to Novice for the rest of the game. The Ranger will likewise be sent to Volcanus after its refit, but for something completely different. It'll pick up Volcanus exclusive materials and end products. Then it will return to Novice to drop some of those off, and pick up some Novice exclusive materials and products. Then it'll go to Gleba to drop that off, in addition to whatever wasn't dropped off at Novice. Then it'll head off to Fulgora to pick up the Fulgora exclusive materials and products. Ranger will then return to Novice to drop it all off and pick up more of the Novice exclusive materials. The cycle will be complete with another trip directly to Volcanus. While I'm waiting for those vessels to arrive at Novice, I'm gonna start cleaning up this base, and the spaghetti. And I will start by disposing of these pentapod eggs. And this one heating tower is all I need. I'll just have everything inside the walls deconstructed, leaving the walls intact for obvious reasons. And with the requester chest set up the way it is, there's absolutely no chance of an outbreak before all of the pentapod eggs are burned up. This does mean I'll have to find more egg rafts to restart the process, but at least I won't get an outbreak of large pentapods that'll try to kill me. My ship's arrived at Novice, so it's time to start the refit process. So I made a deconstruction planner that'll erase everything except for the cargo bays, and the tiles. And I made a second deconstruction planner to erase the tiles which were left behind by the first deconstruction planner. I then stamped down this new blueprint which increases power generation, adds power storage, and adjusts the pumps so that they can remove fuel from the engines when they're not being pumped into the engines, thereby saving a whole lot of fuel. Time to repeat the process for Scout. Out with the old, in with the new. And I'm pretty much gonna do the same with Gleba, although it's gonna take a whole lot longer. Oh, what's this? A new space platform? Introducing the Ranger 2 class. The Ranger 2 will be my personal transport within the inner solar system. Looks like the deconstruction of my Gleba base has completed. Here's the new blueprint I'll be using, which is completely spaghetti free. Not only that, it's tileable. It might not have been the best idea to make two of them. And it looks like the old power plant is biting the dust. And now science production is back online. I wasn't recording when the achievement came up, but I had the recording software at least running. The biters have finally gotten annoyed by my pollution cloud, so they're gonna try to destroy the pollution source. Unfortunately for them, it's gonna take more than just 2 medium biters to do it. Oh no, a big biter. I'm so scared. Oh no, a big spitter. Just kidding. They couldn't even damage my wall. I may or may not have gotten carried away with the artillery. How stupid do you have to be to literally walk into the flames? Anyways, here's my new power plant, which I definitely did not misalign by a single tile. I misaligned it by a single tile. Don't worry, the misalignment did not create more spaghetti. The blueprint itself created the spaghetti just by existing. I really hate this planet. As you can see, my new blueprints are working flawlessly. Nothing a few more combinators can't fix. Oh look, more broken combinators. This middle and operation is supposed to be an OR operation. I don't know how it became an AND operation, but I have to fix it on 30 combinators to make this power plant fully operational. By the way, this power plant can produce 1.2 gigawatts. Time to expand the bot mall to make Gleba truly self-sufficient. Oh look, I'm building another space platform. This one's going to be called the Explorer. Its job will be to transport items from Gleba to Novice. By the way, I finally gotten around to building the Tesla weapons. And I finally have proper iron and copper production on Gleba. Here's the Kickstarter on the left-hand side, followed by the actual production on the right-hand side. These long belts will pretty much ensure that the copper and iron bacteria spoil before they get to the furnaces. We now have a steady supply of 30... Houston, we have a problem here. Nothing like forgetting that the bioflux is supposed to go on one side of the belt when it gets to the pentapod production. You can do this by pushing Ctrl plus Shift plus F4 at the same time. I hid the UI so that I could have a clean demonstration of the new iron and copper build, but something went wrong. In my panic while trying to reactivate the UI, I hit the wrong button and activated more than the UI. Now that I have that situation under control, I need to get this other situation under control. The thing is, with the pentapod eggs packed up, they're just gonna keep hatching like this in groups. So it's time for a more aggressive approach when dealing with this constant outbreak. I hate firing on my own factory, but it seems I have no choice. It's a good thing that the bots are at least repairing the walls, and it's also here that I discover that destroying the belts doesn't destroy the items on the belts. And firing rockets at items on the ground doesn't destroy the items on the ground. Also, how are the pentapods getting outside the walls when the walls are intact? Oh, that's how. They're simply spawning outside the walls. Now that I at least have some peace and quiet, I can begin diagnosing the problem. This lull in the action provided the perfect opportunity for me to diagnose the problem as this one bioflux belt. So I'm gonna be relying on my lasers to keep me safe while I conduct the repairs. Fortunately, the pentapods don't seem interested in attacking my bots. There we are, good as new, like it never even happened. Because I blew up pentapod production, some of the biolabs producing pentapod eggs are no longer producing pentapod eggs. But seeing as how there are still some biochambers producing pentapod eggs, that's an easy fix. Okay, live commentary time. As you can see, I've made a few more adjustments to Gleba since the last clip. So, Novice is currently being starved of iron because it's not getting the calcite it needs. And fixing that is going to be quite the chore. I've made an adjustment to all of my ships, so we now have a combinator that detects if we're stopped and turns off these pumps if we are. Here's a blueprint for rocket silos on Gleba. I'm currently working on the rest of it in the lab. I'll import that when I'm done. But this is going to be the end of this video. In the next video, we are definitely going to Aquilo. So, hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to rate, comment, subscribe, and share, and I will see you in the next video. This is T Chapman 500 signing off.